It is not a problem for both the Ukrainians and the Russians to detect and destroy significant concentrations of manpower and equipment that are trying to conduct offensive operations. Proof of this is the many different episodes since the beginning of the full-scale invasion. The latest is the current attempt by the occupiers to advance northeast of Avdiivka. Well, the first attempts of the Russian blitzkrieg can be considered to have failed. In the area of Avdiivka, the annihilation of the Russian occupiers continues. In some areas, according to various sources, they have advanced to a distance of 300 meters to a kilometer, but this is nowhere near what they had hoped for. It is worth noting that the Ukrainian command took into account the mistakes of the flanks of Solidar, so the occupiers did not manage to repeat this again. And the main reason for their failure is the readiness of the AFU soldiers. Some time before the active actions of the enemy, most of the Ukrainian units already clearly knew who, what, where and how will happen. Of course, sometimes we had to leave the positions. Of course, the Ukrainian side also suffered losses. But this is obviously due to the fact that the occupants went on the attack in the best traditions of the Soviet generals. That is, they pressurize with the mass and quantity of military equipment. During these 4 days of the offensive, the Russian side has already suffered losses exceeding the figures of Vugleda at the beginning of this year and Bilogorivka last year. They will not be able to pressurize for long, no matter how much equipment and personnel they have. After all, the rate of burning of the enemy's equipment, manpower and reserves is many times higher than both the rate of their advance and the losses of the Ukrainian side. But I have no doubt that there will still be attempts, and then, in terms of the number of losses, it will be comparable to Chernihiv and Sumy regions at the very beginning of a full-scale war. The epic offensive of the Russian troops, which Russian propaganda was replicating as that offensive and almost became the encirclement of Avdiivka, turned into a massacre. The AFU repulsed all attacks by assault armored groups of Russian troops. Reports in the media about the capture of the slag heap by the enemy are disinformation of the Russian side. However, it should be added that the Avdiivka slag heap is now the main target of the Russian troops, given the current situation on the battlefield. At the moment, the enemy has used about half of the equipment prepared for the encirclement of Avdiivka. Given the effective defense of the AFU and the minimal advances made, the Russian forces are one step away from strategic defeat. However, the remaining part of the offensive equipment and personnel can be used for the breakthrough and encirclement. But in such a case it will be impossible for the enemy to hold the ring, taking into account the transfer of tactical reserves of the Ukrainian forces and the counterattack of the AFU from Avdiivka itself. A change of tactics often makes it possible to achieve success with parity on the battlefield, so the Russian command can bet on superiority in tactical aviation and mass use of aerial bombs, but in this case there are nuances. Strategic defeat and strategic victory are at stake. The transformation of Russian equipment into scrap metal, and the occupants themselves into fertilizer is not over yet.